A girl stepped out of a book and into the modern world. Yet she didn't even know how to use a toilet. After all, she was once a cold, aloof sect master who had killed countless enemies. As a generation-defining leader, she had no idea how to speak of such matters to mortals. She could only sit down and circulate her spiritual energy, using cultivation to ease the pressure in her bladder. Because she simply couldn't believe that a two-dimensional world could truly coexist with reality. Nonsense. How could she possibly be a character from a book? And yet, why did the man before her know everything about her, her past and her future alike? Only then did she realize that, in the world of the book, she was the female lead, Qiu Wuji. In her original world, she despised nothing more than people gossiping about her relationship with her disciples. Anyone caught wagging their tongue would be executed without mercy. Yet she could never understand why her destined bond was tied to a single useless disciple. Everything happening around her carried a sense of predestined design, as if it had been tailored specifically for the two of them. Yet she did not like that useless disciple of hers at all. In the very next second, her world shattered into streams of garbled symbols. She found herself pulled into a realm made entirely of code. The text floating within it recorded her past and her future. What was all of this supposed to mean? Moments later, she saw a man writing her fate, claiming she would bear a child with her useless disciple and spend her life with him, all while scribbling with a lewd, snickering grin. Qiu Wuji's mind collapsed. Did that mean every thought of hers, every flower and tree in this world, was nothing more than a pre-written plot? And why would it say that she would fall in love with that useless disciple? This was never a world Qiu Wuji could accept. Anyone who dared to manipulate her fate, no matter who they were, deserved death. The scene shifted to the real world. Sitting across from the man was a stunning beauty in black stockings. Although this blind date partner was strikingly attractive, the man felt no interest at all. After all, he had been urged to marry 105 times, and had already failed 107 blind dates. As expected, the woman soon asked about his monthly income. The man said he earned tens of thousands a month. But as a novelist who specialized in harem-style, borderline deranged fiction, his income was anything but stable. Hearing that, the woman immediately labeled him as unemployed. In that case, I have other things to take care of. I'll be leaving. Watching her walk away, the man felt no sadness at all. After all, the women he imagined and wrote about in his novels were more than 1,000,000 times prettier than any blind date partner. The only pity was that this woman truly was the most beautiful one he had ever met in real life. The man returned home and was just about to turn on his computer, when suddenly a chill crept up from behind him. It was the height of August summer, so why was the room so cold? And even though the window was in front of him, the cold came unmistakably from his back. Before the man could think further, a flash of cold light appeared. A deep blue longsword was pressed against his throat, its icy chill seeming to freeze even his soul. He glanced sideways. Don't tell me some fan hated my writing so much they mailed me a blade? But the intruder was neither a fan nor a robber. She was the female lead from his novel, Qiu Wuji. If you dare write that I fall in love with that useless disciple, even if my world collapses, I'll still take your life. Their eyes met, and the air seemed to freeze for several seconds. Or perhaps it was only an instant. The Shenai sword terrified the man. Miss, who exactly are you? This one is Sect Master Qiu Wuji. That if you cannot understand human words, then I will take your head. Was this for real? Just because she didn't like the male lead I wrote, she came out of the book to kill me? No, this had to be it. I'd been pulling too many all-nighters that I was losing my mind. But the door was clearly locked. How did she get in? If she were a thief, that didn't make sense either. What kind of thief breaks in just to threaten an author into changing a novel? So, putting that aside, she was unbelievably captivating. More beautiful than any woman he had ever seen in real life. Her appearance, her presence, even her attire perfectly matched the descriptions in the book. Alright, whether you're really Qiu Wuji or just some crazy cosplayer, let's put the sword down and talk first. Qiu Wuji had no interest in listening to his nonsense and shoved the man straight out of the way. She sat down alone in front of the computer and pondered for a moment. Then she tried channeling her spiritual power into the machine. At once, the computer began to emit a strange crackling sound. The man hurriedly told her to stop. Hey, that thing cost me months of salary. Alright, I'm convinced now. You really are Qiu Wa. No normal person could pull this off. Fine, tell me. What kind of script do you want? Say it and I'll write it for you. You were panicking just now, but you're surprisingly calm all of a sudden. Panicking won't help. I want answers even more than you do. So, what do you want? Handsome men, piles of gold. I can write all of it in. This one has attained enlightenment, ascension, breaking beyond the limits of heaven and man. That's impossible. That you've already violated the world's original settings. Ascension simply can't happen. What did you say? Are you telling me that in your setting I can't ascend? No, that's not it. You just can't ascend right now. You're the protagonist. If the protagonist disappears, the story collapses. I don't care about that. Write romance right now exactly as I say. Fine, you decide. Suddenly, the woman felt as though the gates of heaven had opened, the intent of ascension washing over her. She sensed it for a long time, yet it seemed that nothing happened at all. See, I told you this wouldn't work. The woman's mood sank. I never imagined that our so-called creator God would be nothing more than a frail scholar with no strength to fight. And that my world is merely a book, every joy and sorrow, every future fate, all controlled by a single pen. The man let out a sigh. Right now, I understand your feelings even better than you do. After all, your entire personality was written by me. You wretched scholar, were you just pitying this one? Well, not exactly. Some say that once a character is written, they're no longer fully under the author's control. And your very appearance proves that saying true. So you're saying that if I end up liking that man, it might actually be my own choice? Sorry about that. I really overlooked this part. That useless disciple. He truly doesn't match Chiowuji at all. That it's like a frog trying to eat swan meat. But come on, I write harem power fantasies. That if the plot isn't exaggerated, who would even read my book? Even so, that could never be a choice this one would accept. Figure it out yourself. Give me a satisfying ending. Watching Chiowuji, the man was already starting to regret it. He never should have written her to be this sharp. No matter what ending you choose or how you do it, you are forbidden from writing any romance between me and that useless disciple. This one can come out again at any time. If you keep writing nonsense, you'll never write another word. With a sharp smack, Chiowuji vanished. Before leaving, she made sure to slap the man hard across the face. It felt too real. I end my settings. Chiowuji was never meant to be gentle or kind, and even that slap had been something I personally wrote into her character. That aside, I was about to stop updating altogether. How was the plot supposed to continue? If the female lead refused to be with the male lead, could this even still be a harem novel? Then why not go all the way, mutual destruction? As long as she didn't end up with the male lead, that would work, right? The scene returned to the world within the book. Chiowuji was cultivating in seclusion inside a hidden chamber. Her momentary breach into the outside world had been driven by rage, but her physical body couldn't sustain it for long. Upon reaching her limit, she was forced to return. Her divine sense settled back into place, and Chiowuji slowly opened her eyes, momentarily unfocused before sharpening into resolve. So this is what they call fate at work. And that so-called creator, a frail scholar with no strength, he thinks he can change my destiny? I can already break through it now. The priority is figuring out how to break it at will, and how to remain in the outside world for extended periods. The universe is boundless, the world vast. Why limit myself? Falling for a useless disciple. What a joke, that could never be my future. If I were to choose a man at all, then it should be my creator. The transition of that thought was far too smooth, and Chiowuji suddenly sensed something was wrong. What am I even thinking? Don't tell me. This was written by him. He actually dared to write this? Sure enough, inside the book, the man had quietly replaced the useless disciple with himself. He thought he was finally about to hold a beauty in his arms, but Chiowuji's smile grew more and more unsettling. In the next instant, she pulled a shienai sword out from her pants. The blade thrust straight toward the man. He jolted awake from the dream, drenched in cold sweat. Thank goodness, she probably couldn't cross worlds whenever she wanted. Otherwise, he'd be dead for sure. He had rushed to publish the last chapter without even checking for typos. Nervously, he opened the comment section. He expected nothing but curses, yet when he looked, he froze. There wasn't a single insult. Instead, the praise was overwhelming. Well, this is actually pretty good. Looks like people really enjoy this kind of bizarre plot. The next second, loud knocking echoed from next door. Who is it turning on the lights in the middle of the night? Just as the man was about to knock, his roommate opened the door first, as if he had foreseen it. Seeing the suitcase in his roommate's hand, The man immediately understood. The two of them ended up at a street-side barbecue stall. The roommate gulped down beer, clearly weighed down by something on his mind. I don't know if I'm just not working hard enough, or if my attitude isn't right. No one ever likes my posts that I think I'll take a break for a while and go home to see my mom. Ever since he moved here, he'd been staying up late almost every night, his lower back and neck riddled with problems. Even working this hard, his income was still worse than that of a delivery driver. In truth, he had an agreement with his family. If this book failed, he would go back home. After chasing dreams for so many years, it was time to wake up and live like a normal person. You've already worked hard enough. Go home and live well. We can drink together again sometime. After all, we're still in the same city. After exchanging a few final words, the two said their last goodbyes. On his way home, the man knew perfectly well that his situation was no better than his roommates. They were the same at the core. Just as he let out a sigh, a dark shadow suddenly flashed past him. That scared the hell out of me. When did she get here? I didn't hear a single footstep. Isn't that the girl who lives next door? The one who does live streams every day? Looks like business hasn't been great lately. Even streamers are out drinking to drown their worries. The man returned home. Staring at the empty room, he realized that from now on, all his worries would have to be told only to himself. In the next instant, a Xianai's sword appeared silently at his throat. That line you wrote in the book, about me falling in love with the creator, was that you asking for death Qiu Wuji demands? This time, however, the man didn't feel afraid. Instead, he said, "Thank you." That left Qiu Wuji momentarily stunned. You didn't panic so badly that you started talking nonsense, did you? No, I just think it's really nice to be able to meet you here. What nonsense? We haven't even been apart for that many days. Your brain must be broken. I'll just cut it off for you. No, you won't kill me, because I don't remember you ever holding a sword at someone's throat. When you fight, you usually kill outright. Holding it like this means you don't actually want to kill me. In that instant, the woman's mind went completely numb. How annoying. This world's most understanding person of her wasn't herself. I'm killing you right now. Wait, did I still have something to say? Then explain this to me. What exactly does that line mean, the one that says I should choose the creator if I'm to choose a man? That? Let me think. Right. Since you didn't want to end up with that useless male lead, the plot still needed something to tie it together. So having you fall for a creator-level existence, doesn't that perfectly match your status? Then answer me this. Why do I have to choose a man at all? I shouldn't even be having thoughts like this. I'll give you one day. Change it back. Why aren't you saying anything? Aren't you a writer? Did you go mute? If it's about rewriting that part of the story, it seems it can't be changed anymore. Then you must be tired of living. Die. In that case, we'll meet again in the next book. Wait, something just occurred to me. I can apply a patch. What do you mean by that? When you appeared, I sensed something faintly. I felt that you could exist beyond the script of this book. After all, you're only interacting through divine consciousness right now. It's extremely dangerous. One mistake could cause space-time distortion, even total annihilation. Haha, and so what? I can apply a patch. Make it much easier for you to cross worlds whenever you want. Are you saying you're willing to help me? In a way. Your appearance just happens to cure the mental exhaustion I'm dealing with right now. In this world, I'm someone who can't even control my own fate. So I can't imagine what it would be like if I were a character in a book. I'd probably go insane. The day your ascension failed, it was most likely because I didn't hit publish. So I rewrote it. Your ascension failed, but you discovered a way to project your spirit into the outside world. And this time it actually worked. Even if you're helping me, you understand me as if you were inside my own body. Aren't you afraid I might kill you? Why would Qiu Wuji kill someone who's helping her? I poured all my best fantasies into you. The woman I wrote gained a soul, no longer just cold text. For someone who weaves worlds, what greater surprise could there be? We've met twice and you never once asked my name. Maybe you thought it wasn't important. But I think it's worth saying. Hello, my name is Chu Gu. You shameless rogue, trying to touch me already. What do you take me Qiu Wuji for? Ow, this hurts like hell. Next time I'm definitely adding a grip strength stat for you. By the way, Qiu Wuji, I don't know if you're hungry right now. Want to go out and take a look around? It was Qiu Wuji's first time walking the streets with a man. The sights before her left her completely stunned. How strange. These people can transmit messages across vast distances using a single black box. And that man, was he using some kind of fire control technique? These mortals clearly have no spiritual energy, so how can they accomplish feats only immortals should be capable of? And yet, why does everything here feel so incredibly real? Chiyo, what's wrong? Feeling lost as a traveler in a foreign land? Alright, don't overthink it. Come on, experience your heavenly realm. They entered a restaurant. Want to try some braised noodles? The girl didn't speak, only nodded softly. A moment ago she was still cautious. Then in the next instant she devoured the food eagerly. It was unbelievably good. As expected of a sect master. Finished the whole bowl in no time. Behind Chiyo, men whispered among themselves, "She's gorgeous, and dressed beautifully too. You shameless rogue, explain this to me. Didn't you say no one would care about my attire? And now? It's summer. Not everyone can ignore heat and cold the way you can." Hearing that, even the shop owner nearby felt that Chuji's excuse actually made a lot of sense. By the way, Chugo, why didn't you try to suppress my emotions? Wouldn't that benefit you more? Because then you wouldn't be my Chiyo. The moment he said that, the girl's face flushed red. Who's Chiyo? Even if you're the only person I know in this world, I can still get by, rob the rich, help the poor, and endure. But if she wanted to understand this world more quickly, staying by his side was undeniably more convenient. Especially after that line. He really didn't seem to harbor any ill intent. Chiyo, come to my computer room. I'll tell you about the next part of the script. Next, you'll be deep within the Serpent Cavern, fighting the Poison Hand Demon Lord for days and nights. Although you hold the upper hand, the Poison Hand Demon Lord suddenly uses a sinister artifact to ambush you, knocking you into a pool. You're afflicted by the venom of a rare serpent. Pure nonsense. How could the Poison Hand Demon Lord ever be my match? Easy. Let me finish first. Your useless disciple just happens to be near the cavern. After all, he's the protagonist, so through sheer coincidence he finds the antidote. Are you seriously planning to write one of those clique romance scenes where my useless disciple feeds me the medicine? Of course not. It's nothing more than letting your useless disciple earn some merit and slowly catch your eye. After all, he's the protagonist. I can't give him zero screen time. Then just don't write the poisoning plot at all. Wait, if you already know the plot, then the Poison Hand Demon Lord can't ambush you anyway. That's on me. Does this count as foresight? Or is fate truly unavoidable? Fine, let's write it your way. From now on, you will have no further ties with that useless disciple. This is your life and no one has the right to dictate it. Not me and not heaven. Let's run a test and see what fate says. When I came here last time, I could clearly sense people living here. Why does it look completely empty now? Did they move out yesterday? He suddenly understood. This was why he felt lonely. And perhaps that was exactly why her arrival felt so timely. Thanks for writing a female lead just to keep yourself company. That's twisted, isn't it? All those grotesque demonic practices, weren't they written by him too? What kind of things does he even think about? Disgusting. After writing for a full 2.5 hours, the draft was finally complete. He couldn't help but take another look. Chiyo, you're beautiful. Like a mysterious being meant to dwell in a distant sanctuary, now descended into the mortal world. Standing around won't help. See what you can actually do. What can I do? I don't understand anything yet. What if I break your computer again like last time? Besides, you don't exactly look well off. If you want to truly understand this world, you'll need a two-pronged approach that I'll show you. Chugu turned on the television. On the screen was a man and a woman, clearly not suitable for children. Chiyo froze in embarrassment and stepped back. This is what you're showing me about the real world? No, my mistake. Hold on. He hurriedly switched channels. On the screen, men were shouting wildly, "Fire! Fire! Fire!" Chiyo was startled. Are these the magical weapons immortals used to fight? That's just an early war movie. Modern weapons are far more terrifying. In short, the outside world is dangerous. You need to be careful. So this is the heavenly realm. Even without spiritual energy, it's this powerful. I'm not watching this. I want history. History? I don't really have any at home. How about this? I'll buy you a book. That way someone will deliver it to you. Is that long-distance thought transmission or flying sword delivery? How long does it usually take? It takes some time, so you'll probably have to wait a few days. If waiting is required, then I shall wait. I see you still have an empty room here. I'll stay for these few days, if that won't disturb you. Chugu paused, thinking, that's ODD.in my settings. Chiowuji shouldn't be this proactive. Could it be related to when I changed that falling in love with the creator line? What's that look for? If not for some so-called creator, I, Chiowuji, would have the clear breeze as my companion and the bright moon as my mate. We're merely living next door, each pursuing our own path. It's not like we're sharing a bed. What's the problem? Alright, you're right at your breeze and moon. I'm sleazy and shameless. Happy now? For the first time in her life she was living with a man, and that man happened to be her creator. For the first time in his life he was living with a woman, and she happened to be the female lead he had written. The next morning, Chugu was simply scrolling on his phone while squatting in the bathroom. Chiowuji noticed and snapped in anger, "What are you doing here? Move aside at once." The man was utterly awkward. "What are you trying to do? There's only my toothbrush and towel in here." Chiowuji flicked her skirt. "What is a toothbrush?" "It's for cleaning your mouth, kind of like those willow twigs dipped in liquid you use. Though, your teeth probably haven't been brushed for thousands of years." "You shameless rogue. Are you courting death, trying to stuff into my mouth something you put into yours?" With that, Chiowuji tossed Chugu straight out the door. She then entered the bathroom and saw the toilet. A blush spread across her face once more. How was this artifact supposed to be used? Outside, Chuji's thoughts tangled. Was she trying to use the bathroom but too embarrassed to say it? But she was an immortal. Do immortals need to use the toilet too? Ah, right, they had beef noodle soup last night. Digestion was inevitable. It must be because this body was still at the cheer-fining stage. Fine. He'd go out and buy some things women usually need. The woman stepped out of the bathroom about to ask Chugu how to use that artifact, only to find that he was gone. "I can't sense his presence any." But did he get angry? Who would have thought that a once-renowned sect master would end up unable to use the bathroom in the modern world? She hugged the little pig plush, feeling utterly wronged. Fortunately, the next second she heard Chugu returning home. Just as the girl was about to ask how to use the toilet, Chugu cut her off with a single line. "You ate so much yesterday, you must have been starving, right? I bought you 30 buns and a teacup as beautiful as you are, Chio, that I'm sure you'll like it." The woman nearly broke down, declaring she didn't want to stay in this world for even one more second. But the male lead was a crafty pervert, and with just 3 sentences he talked her back down. "I may be able to influence your thoughts and actions, but didn't you say you wanted your own life? Then you have to learn to endure, and to adapt to this world." Chiowuji found his words reasonable yet still asked, "But, does my presence trouble you?" "I already told you. Your presence is exactly what's stabilizing my mental state right now. The one thing you need to do now is go online and see if there's anything you like." When Chiowuji looked down at the screen, her entire worldview was shattered. The girl stared at the bunny girl images on the phone, completely dumbfounded. Even demonic sect temptresses wouldn't dress like this. "Forget it. This isn't my world. Maybe this kind of outfit is normal here. Still, am I relying too much on this artifact? Let's go out. Take me to buy clothes. I'll pay you back for the clothes, food, and lodging. Then tell me, how exactly are you going to pay me back? If you're thinking about bringing gold out of the book, that won't work. Your existence here is fundamentally a projection. The day you disappear, the gold disappears too. Then the bank comes after me." "Actually, I have another way," Chiowuji began, only to be cut off. "I know what you're about to say. Stealing or robbing is impossible. The technology in our world is far stronger than the artifacts in yours." Chiowuji was nearly driven mad. Was it because he created her that he knew every thought in her mind? "But I do have an idea. Your settings give you exceptional intelligence. You could help me write novels. The only issue is registration might require an ID. I know what you're about to ask. An ID here is basically like your sect token. I can just write one for you. I'll be the one paying you anyway, at least that keeps my conscience clear." "But, does writing really guarantee money?" Chugu nodded without speaking, though something felt off. Even if she was written as a genius, that didn't mean she was a genius at storytelling. Her thinking was orthodox and strict. She despised lies. People like that were often bad at making things up. Chiowuji seemed to see through his thoughts. She stood up. "I, Chiowuji, have roamed the world. I refuse to believe I can't find a way to earn a living. This is just a temporary blind spot. Then we'll look for it slowly. I'll advise you along the way." "Why are you being so enthusiastic?" "Helping you also helps me. You're right. I'm not wealthy and I really can't afford to support another person. And secondly, I want you to understand, I'm not doing this to fawn over you. If you're going to live in the real world, you have to put in your own effort. Qiu Wuji didn't quite understand what fawning meant, but she felt it probably wasn't literal. Only a Qiu Wuji who could live independently in this world was truly free from being just a character in a book. Qiu Ji's words struck straight at her heart. She smiled, perhaps for the first time, like ice melting and flowers blooming. The entire room seemed to brighten, fragrant and radiant beyond the mortal world. Take me to buy a set that I'll consider this fitting room borrowed from you. Before Qiu Wuji even bought anything, the shop assistants surrounded her. Wow, miss, your hanfu is gorgeous. Where did you get it? The envy in their eyes practically overflowed. Why do the clothes in this store use so little fabric? Is Chugu just too poor? Next, the staff brought over a student-style JK outfit. Then came a pile of breezy summer clothes. Take a few steps and your legs are already exposed. How annoying that I'll definitely pick something with more fabric. The assistants all thought his girlfriend was adorable, blushing just from holding clothes. Chugu asked, "Am I not handsome?" The assistant laughed awkwardly and said nothing. Seriously, how does shopping together automatically make me his girlfriend? And what's with these flashy outfits? Why can't I blush? The old warrior green attire slowly faded away, mist revealing a flawless form like fresh snow. Then the fitting room curtain was pulled open in one swift motion. Everyone was stunned. Especially Chugu. He never imagined his Xianxia sect master could step into the real world and look this beautiful even in cheap clothes. Beautiful people look beautiful in anything, just like the peerless ice queen written in books. As the sect master stood there, a shop assistant suddenly sensed something was off. "Miss, this looks extremely specialized. Everything underneath is antique style." Chiochio had no idea what underwear even was. But the assistant strongly insisted she remove the binding as well. "It's so hot right now." At that moment, Chiochio froze in pure embarrassment and looked to Chugu for help. Chugu forced his face into a blank expression, but still had to speak up. "1 D-tier set, the flashiest thing you've got." The shop assistants were stunned that if he was the boyfriend, knowing the tier made sense. But flashiest was another story entirely. Qiu Wuji felt deeply uncomfortable showing her legs. She glanced at a pair of long black stockings. They seemed decent and she was about to ask if she could buy them. Chugu cut in immediately. "These may use less fabric but they're extremely breathable. Get them." Chiochio thought to herself. People in this world are so strange that I guess there really that big a difference between wearing this and not. What if people stare? Chugu kept his face straight but inside he was screaming. "Worth it. Absolutely worth it, even if I live on instant noodles next month." Chiochio noticed something off. "You didn't look like this before. Right now you look like a stiff, trembling block of wood. Don't be ridiculous. What's strange about it? You've seen plenty of people wearing this outside and it's just that none of them are as pretty as you. Look at their eyes, they're so jealous they could swallow you whole. I think you're the one who wants to swallow me. That said, it does feel comfortable that it just looks a bit odd." She pressed her legs together slightly. "People here are really strange. Does wearing this really make that much difference?" It still felt embarrassing but admittedly it was comfortable. Chugu hadn't enjoyed the view for long before a bucket of cold water was poured over him. Qiu Wuji suddenly asked, "What did the shop assistant mean by girlfriend just now?" Facing Qiu Wuji's overwhelmingly intense gaze, Chugu suddenly wondered. When she finds out everything, will he still be alive? With his survival instincts at full throttle, Chugu launched into smooth talk. He explained that it was just a casual term used among close female friends. Qiu Wuji let out a wordless sigh. All you do is make things up. She had already figured out that girlfriend meant a romantic partner. She wasn't particularly angry, so she couldn't be bothered to argue with Chugu. Now that she had modern clothing, it counted as her first step toward blending into this world. Chugu nodded slightly. "At least you won't be stared at like a zoo animal when you go out." Qiu Wuji then asked about the second step. Was it getting an official identity in this world? Chugu froze. Getting an identity wasn't easy. All he could do was ask friends around. He turned on the TV so Qiu Wuji could learn more about modern life. From the screen, she learned about the city they were in and the transportation used for travel. She also understood leisure games, and even what titles like husband and wife meant. At that moment, Qiu Wuji's eyes lit up. She had spotted a strawberry cake on TV that looked delicious. Chuga said he'd take her to try it next month. After all, buying her Balenciaga had drained his writing income. Chiu Wuji immediately understood. Food like that probably cost several times more than Chu Ji's usual soy milk and steamed buns. And suddenly she realized why Chugu wrote stories like that. He couldn't have it, so he felt resentment. And from that resentment came fantasy. His readers fantasized the same way. A boy of ordinary birth and ordinary talent, climbing to the peak through sheer effort. The flowers he picked along the way were his rewards, and she might have been the finest of them all. Realizing this, Chiu Wuji lost the desire to keep asking, even as Chugu looked at her with curiosity. She pushed Chugu toward his keyboard, telling him to work while she handled her own matters. There would be plenty of time later. Chugu couldn't help but smile. Had she learned to be considerate? Seeing him still staring, Chiu Wuji waved her hand, urging him to hurry. The scene made the corner of Chuji's mouth lift. He suddenly felt as if he had a home. As the thought crossed his mind, he noticed Chiu Wuji standing there, slowly fading away. It turned out her time in the real world had run out. Coincidentally, Chiu Wuji also wanted to return, to see whether she could change the plot Chugu had written. As for Chugu, he silently mourned. Those short skirts, that Balenciaga. He'd barely looked at them before they were gone. He stared at the clothes Chiu Wuji had left scattered on the floor. Chugu stayed silent for a moment. His past self might have made use of them. At this moment, Chugu had no focus at all. He quietly picked up Chiu Wuji's clothes and the Balenciaga stockings, then tossed them into the washing machine. He went back to his room to write. But his thoughts were a mess and the words wouldn't come. After struggling for a while, he uploaded the chapter in a hurry. Afraid to read the comments, Chugu hesitated, then opened the group chat. The group was criticizing the new chapter, all for the same reason. Too short, too weak. Chugu tapped out a reply on his phone, saying he was revising the outline and asking them to bear with it for now. When he spoke up, the group not only asked when Chiu Wuji would exit the story, but also said his writing was getting better. That left Chugu puzzled. He'd just been winging it. Turns out they felt his writing had become more delicate. The micro-expressions and clothing details were things he'd never been good at before. Chugu didn't say much, just sent a "gotta go" sticker. So being praised felt really good. In the world of the book, Chiu Wuji opened her eyes inside the sealed chamber. The moment felt like a lifetime apart, as if it had all been a dream. Soon she arrived at the sect's main hall and received intelligence about Qinglong Ling Tian within the 10,000 Serpent Cavern. Everything matched what Chugu had written, except that in the original text her reaction was calm. She refused that. She chose to smile instead, and ordered that Chu Tiange, the one who discovered the clue, be brought before her. Chu Tiange was summoned and bowed respectfully to Chiu Wuji. As he bowed, cold sweat streamed down his back. He couldn't shake the feeling that the sect master's gaze carried killing intent. And indeed, Chiu Wuji's gaze had shifted, from killing intent to imagination. She noticed that Chu Tiange looked somewhat like Chugu, like an alternate account, or perhaps like a son. By that logic, was Chugu competing with his own son for a woman? After confirming the predetermined plot, she led the sect's elites toward the 10,000 Serpent Cavern, where the azure dragon's scales lay. Yet while flying on her sword, she clutched her skirt tightly. Not out of fear of exposure, but because Chugu had written her robe to flutter gracefully, she wanted to change that part of the story. At the same time, her gaze shifted to the male lead, Chu Tiange. Since she hadn't altered how Chu Tiange obtained the clue to the azure dragon scale, she rewarded him with entry to the 3rd level of the scripture pavilion, allowing him to choose any technique. Yet Chu Tiange didn't aim too high. He only picked a technique he liked from the 2nd level. In the original text, he had also entered the 2nd level. Was this fate correcting itself? Then what about her battle with the Poison Hand Demon Lord? Could she change it now that she knew the plot? Meanwhile, in the real world, Chugu tried to secure an ID for Chiu Wuji and contacted a classmate preparing for the civil service exam. After some probing conversation, Chugu realized how difficult it was, far beyond what his classmate could handle, unless he knew some high-ranking official. Otherwise, it simply wasn't something a small-time nobody like him could accomplish. If he reported Chiu Wuji as a transmigrator, Chugu didn't believe she'd be cut up for research. It might be the opposite. Showing a bit of immortal arts could earn her VIP treatment, though at the cost of some freedom and cooperation with cultivation studies. Still, Chugu couldn't help wondering whether he himself could cultivate the techniques from Chiu Wuji's world. And Chiu Wuji surely wouldn't want to fall into that situation either. Besides, Chugu wasn't without selfish thoughts. Chiu Wuji was stunning. Maybe one day he could even win her over and live together as a couple. Though he hadn't found a solution for her identity, Chugu wasn't overly anxious. Chiowuji was, after all, a cultivator, roaming forests, traversing seas, dominating the world. How could she be bound by something as trivial as an identity? Chugu then returned to his writing grind. Yet with Chiowuji's interference, he vaguely felt his harem novel being pushed, by a wife, no less, into a single heroine story. Meanwhile, in the world of the book, Chiowuji reached the deepest level of the 10,000 Serpent Cavern. She saw the azure dragon scale floating above the pool. Instead of flying forward, she used a severed ribbon from her sleeve to draw the scale toward her. But with a single pull, it wouldn't budge, as if a powerful suction pinned it firmly above the water. A bloody aura surged along the ribbon and invaded her senses. Chiowuji focused her mind and calmly dissolved the bloody force. At that moment, a blood-red demonic hand emerged from the mist behind her. Chiowuji's eyes snapped open. She struck with a single sword thrust, piercing the blood-red hand with precision. From within the mist came a harsh, cackling laugh. Under Chiowuji's gaze, a gaunt old man with feral eyes slowly revealed himself. Chiowuji looked at him, utterly calm. She laid out, step by step, how the Poison Hand Demon Lord had been tailing her. The Poison Hand Demon Lord felt his heart pound. How could Chiowuji know his every move as if she had been watching all along? Sensing danger, he quietly released a dark red centipede from his sleeve. It skittered along the ground and vanished in an instant. Chiowuji seemed completely unfazed and chose to strike immediately. Brilliant sword light flooded the dark cavern. Sword rays came from all directions, pouring down toward the Poison Hand Demon Lord at the center. Unable to dodge in time, the Demon Lord unfurled his blood banner, struggling to block Chiowuji's attacks. He cursed inwardly, opening with a finisher. This wasn't following any script at all. Chiowuji snapped her fingers. Scorching flames erupted out of thin air. The blood banner was burned to ashes. The Poison Hand Demon Lord was stunned that he knew escape was impossible, but even if it meant destroying his own cultivation, he intended to flee with his primordial spirit. At that moment, the blood centipede released earlier crawled into the Dragonfall pool. Its aura surged into the creature, which visibly began to swell. In truth, Chiowuji had been watching the centipede the entire time, observing its changes. She snapped her fingers once more. With a thunderous blast, the centipede shattered, its flesh exploding apart. Blood and fragments splashed onto the azure dragon scale. Vast ancient dragon might spread outward, striking the cavern indiscriminately. Ribbons of silk circled Chiowuji's body, barely holding back the dragon's wrath. At that moment, a vicious glint flashed in the Poison Hand Demon Lord's eyes. His body exploded like the centipede before, only this blast was tens of thousands of times more violent. Even Chiowuji, who was resisting the dragon's might, couldn't withstand it. She was blasted straight toward the Dragonfall pool and plunged into it. The Poison Hand Demon Lord transformed into a streak of primordial spirit and fled, leaving behind a single line of venomous words. Chiowuji had no energy to chase his escaping spirit. Feeling the poison invade her body, one thought echoed again and again in her mind. Was she truly poisoned? Was fate truly unavoidable? Minor details might be altered against what was written, but events tied to destiny itself seemed impossible to reverse. Perhaps this was what it meant by, small matters can change, great events cannot. She had gone all out and guarded against ambush, yet was still forced back onto the predetermined track by an unseen correction. However, when she saw the spiritual herb growing at the bottom of the pool, she recalled what Chugu had written. The antidote lay below, unrelated to the male lead Chu Tiange. That outcome aligned perfectly with her own logic. Where deadly poison thrives, its cure is often born. Chiowuji plucked the antidote mushroom. Taking it as Chugu himself, she swallowed it in a single bite without hesitation. Afterward, Chiowuji went outside and sat down to circulate her cultivation. Soon, footsteps approached. It was Chu Tiange who had come looking for her. Upon learning that Chiowuji had been poisoned, he intended to offer her the serpent immortal fruit he had obtained as an antidote. Chiowuji gently shook her head, signaling him to keep it for alchemy. It was a rare treasure. Seeing Chu Tiange's shocked expression, Chiowuji found it almost amusing. He was probably wondering how she knew about the serpent immortal fruit. Watching Chu Tiange's retreating figure, Chiowuji knew that the red string Chu someone had forcibly tied was, at this point, completely severed. In theory, this dungeon was meant for Chu Tiange, but now the opportunity had fully become hers, Qiu Wuji's. The Azure Dragon scale didn't just boost cultivation. Its true value lay in tempering the soul. After this refinement, Qiu Wuji found herself looking forward to her next trip to the real world. How long would she be able to stay there? Meanwhile, back in reality, Chu Gu was heavily criticized by readers for altering the plot between Qiu Wuji and the male lead. The explosive comment section was something Chu Gu had expected. After all, in harem novels, a poisoned heroine usually leads to at least some tension or suggestive scenes. Instead, this time it was completely clean. If he were a reader, he'd probably complain too. But Qiu Wuji had made it clear, no emotional entanglements with the protagonist. And now, even aside from her demand, Chu Gu himself had no intention of it. Who did Chu Tiange think he was, anyway? As he thought about it, Chu Gu found himself amused, risking his novel completely failing, only to feel jealous of his own protagonist. He didn't know if he was a one-of-a-kind author, past or future, but he had no regrets. Qiu Wuji's vivid, radiant smile was worth everything. When Chu Gu saw that Qiu Wuji had returned, he asked whether the plot involving the Poison Hand Demon Lord had changed. Qiu Wuji said it hadn't. Everything still followed what Chu Gu had written, correcting itself automatically. Chuji's hand paused while washing a cup. He turned around and asked, "Did it hurt when you were poisoned?" Qiu Wuji froze for a moment at the question. A quiet warmth spread through her chest. It was a question no one, including the male lead Chu Tiange, had ever asked, because everyone assumed she was an all-powerful sect master. Was Chu Gu caring for her as her creator, or as a man caring for a woman? The feeling unsettled Qiu Wuji. She couldn't explain it. Aside from embarrassment, there was also a faint trace of bitterness. Hearing that Qiu Wuji was fine, Chu Gu finally let out a breath of relief. At the same time, he understood more clearly than ever. The plots he wrote were still an unchangeable fate for Qiu Wuji and her world. Qiu Wuji then asked Chu Gu why he had written the Poison Hand Demon Lord's escape. After hearing Chu Ji's explanation, Qiu Wuji rolled her eyes. Calling it a stepping stone for the protagonist was just an excuse. He was simply being lazy and didn't want to create a new villain. She snorted softly and asked whether Chu Gu felt proud knowing he was the will of heaven in her world. Chu Gu shook his head. Maybe in a limited sense, yes, but on a broader level, no. For example, he hadn't known she would emerge from the book, nor whether his novel would survive or fade away. So their meeting might have been guided by fate, but that fate wasn't him. Qiu Wuji suddenly felt a little embarrassed and turned her head, sensing a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Chu Gu cleared his throat and changed the subject, asking a question he'd been thinking about, whether he could cultivate the techniques from Qiu Wuji's world. Qiu Wuji grew curious as well and said she could teach Chu Gu the cultivation method. However, the spiritual energy in the real world was extremely thin, so the results would likely be minimal. Even so, Chu Gu was full of anticipation. Cultivation was a dream shared by countless people. As Qiu Wuji taught him the incantations, she casually asked whether the technique was something he had written. Chu Gu said it wasn't. It was probably generated by the world itself. He had only borrowed a bit from the Tao Te Ching. That immediately caught Qiu Wuji's interest, and she said she wanted to read this world's Taoist classics. Chu Gu smiled and said that was no problem. He had several versions saved on his computer. But now it was Qiu Wuji's teaching time. She was about to show Chu Gu how to circulate energy. In the very next moment, Qiu Wuji froze. Chu Gu had asked where the meridians were and how energy was supposed to flow through them. Qiu Wuji parted her soft lips, completely at a loss for words. This was a technique you wrote, yet you didn't even know the basics. She truly wanted to hit him. This was the man who had created her entire world. Fuming, she turned her head and let out a sharp huff. Then she suddenly noticed something, her eyes widening. Her clothes were hanging outside and the wrinkled stockings swayed in the wind, looking as if they'd been kneaded by someone's hands. In an instant, Qiu Wuji seemed to turn into a steam engine, heat rushing to her face as it flushed completely red. Her thoughts ran wild, imagining what Chu Gu might have done to her clothes. She spun around and started pounding Chu Gu with a flurry of light punches. She didn't use much strength. Chu Gu barely felt any pain, only the faint fragrance coming from her. Qiu Wuji knew deep down that Chu Gu had probably only washed her clothes. After holding it in for a long time, her lips trembling, she finally managed to say that he didn't need to wash her clothes anymore. She would do it herself. Chu Gu, confused at first, followed her gaze to the wrinkled stockings and his face darkened. He really hadn't done anything. Watching Chiu Wuji blush with embarrassment and anger, Chugu genuinely feared she might suddenly go all out on him. When Chiu Wuji turned to look at him, Chugu immediately straightened up, not daring to say a word. Chiu Wuji no longer felt like hitting him. When a man and a woman live together, such things are hard to avoid. Still, she made up her mind that she would simply conjure this kind of clothing with spiritual energy in the future, saving Chugu some money. Chugu objected at once, arguing confidently that if one was going to adapt to modern life, then it had to be done thoroughly. Besides, his manuscript fees had already come in. He wasn't that tight on money anymore. Chiu Wuji let out a cold laugh, saying that Chugu just wanted food and clothes so he could do something else. Chugu immediately exploded, loudly declaring that he was absolutely not a pervert. Since Chugu insisted she be real, then he could go buy her another pair of black stockings. As for herself, she directly conjured a pair of Balenciaga stockings, wrapping her fair, slender legs in black silk. Chugu gazed happily at those black silk legs, secretly wondering if he should also buy a pair of white stockings for her. However, since Chugu still needed to learn cultivation techniques, Chiu Wuji decided to teach him properly first. She shot him a cold glance, warning him to listen carefully. If he dared lose focus, he'd be beaten. Chugu listened to Chiu Wuji's explanation with a pitiful expression. He tried to assume a 5 points to the sky posture, but found it rather difficult. Seeing this, Chiu Wuji stepped forward and examined him for a moment. Then she reached out to correct his posture, adjusting his hands and feet. However, with the two of them standing too close, Chugu ended up seeing things he really shouldn't have, along with the faint, alluring scent coming from Chiu Wuji, which instantly sent his thoughts running wild. The result was a solid blow landing right on his head. Chiu Wuji sneered coldly and demanded to know exactly what he was thinking about. Chugu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At this point, Chiu Wuji might as well have been the roundworm living in his stomach. Chiu Wuji curled her lips. How could she not see through that little bit of his dirty thinking? Setting that aside, they finally got down to business. Following Chiu Wuji's instructions, Chugu began his very first attempt at cultivation. But in the very next instant, a piercing pain surged through his body. Chugu felt as if his meridians were being forcibly stretched apart, the pain leaving him drenched in sweat. Chiu Wuji pressed a hand on him, her expression turning serious. Chuji's meridians were severely blocked and congested. Though he looked tall and strong on the outside, his muscles were slack and his internal organs unstable. Simply put, Chugu was far too weak. With his current physical condition, cultivation was out of the question. He would need proper recuperation first. The verdict hit Chugu hard. After all, no man likes being told he's not up to it. And even if not for himself, for Chiu Wuji's sake, Chugu made up his mind to start training his body. And before training, he obviously needed to fill his stomach first. So Chugu took Chiu Wuji out to eat, settling on a hearty bowl of braised chicken. While eating, Chiu Wuji reminded him that starting today, Chugu had to get his diet and daily routine back on track. No more eating just one meal a day and no more staying up late at night. It was terrible for the liver. Chugu was clearly reluctant. Seeing that, Chiu Wuji said that once Chugu became a cultivator, he could stay up as late as he wanted. Chugu found that reasonable and cautiously asked if he should start calling her master now. Hearing that, Chiu Wuji smiled faintly. Then should I call you Father Creator? Chugu instantly lit up, thinking that sounded great. Each of them could use their own title. In the very next moment, Chugu regretted it and got beaten senseless by Chiu Wuji. As Chiu Wuji retrieved the high heel she had used to beat him, she asked in confusion. By her understanding, cooking at home was obviously cheaper and cleaner than eating out, so why go to restaurants every day? Chugu burped and answered with a single word, lazy. At that moment, Chugu suddenly grew curious and asked whether Chiu Wuji knew how to cook. After all, he had never written about her past life in detail. To Chuji's surprise, Chiu Wuji actually could cook. She just snorted coldly and said that even if she could, why should she cook for Chugu? However, Chuji's very next sentence left Chiu Wuji with no choice but to admit, she really did have to cook for him. All because Chugu said just 2 words, rent. Instantly defeated, Chiu Wuji decided on the spot to go buy rice, oil and groceries. Chugu quickly followed, taking her to a large shopping mall. He claimed they were there to buy daily necessities, but in reality, black stockings and white stockings were his true objective. At that moment, Chiu Wuji noticed the clothes displayed nearby. Seeing her interest, Chugu asked if she wanted them. He could buy a set. Having absolutely no concept of couple outfits, Chiu Wuji looked at the identical men's and women's pajamas and voiced her confusion. Chu Gu immediately launched into a full-scale sales pitch, saying that didn't sect disciples all wear the same robes? Living together meant wearing matching clothes was only natural. Chiu Wuji felt it sounded somewhat reasonable, yet the more she thought about it, the more something felt off. Was Chu Gu tricking her? This 10,000-year-old senior ultimately had no room to resist the will of the one paying the bills and happily bought the couple pajamas. Unfortunately, she chose the version printed with cute big-headed cartoon dolls instead of the display model, leaving her deeply dissatisfied. Wearing such childish patterns, how was she supposed to maintain the dignity of a top-tier powerhouse of the continent? At the same time, Chiu Wuji silently swore to herself that she absolutely had to start making money. After Chu Gu took Chiu on a full round through the mall, they not only bought matching pajamas, but also stocked up on rice, oil, and all the essentials for cooking. Of course, carrying all of it left Chu Gu exhausted, like a dog that had been run into the ground. Chiu hoisted 2 huge bags of rice on her shoulder, shot Chu Gu a sideways glance, and asked if he wasn't ashamed, only carrying such a tiny amount. Chu Gu, however, was thick-skinned as ever. She already knew he was weak, so there was nothing left to lose. At that point, Chiu grew curious and asked whether having great strength or being good at fighting could earn money, or if one still needed an official identity. After setting down a bag of rice, Chu Gu replied that it was possible, but it would mean going to war-torn regions. With your level of strength, you'd probably end up a big shot, but it'd be troublesome and honestly unnecessary. Hearing that, Chiu dropped the idea and picked up the groceries, planning to cook for Chu Gu instead. Chu Gu watched her from behind, dressed in her OL outfit, and couldn't help thinking that he wanted to say, "I'll take care of you." But considering his current situation, he really didn't have the right to say something that bold. As for Chiu, she had no intention of living off someone else. She was already determined to break free from the creator's fate. Only equal exchange could make her a truly independent existence. Cooking counted as labor and could offset the rent, though doing housework for someone else still bruised the pride of a top-tier powerhouse. When Chiu lifted the lid of the pot, a cloud of dust mixed with moldy stench rushed straight at her. Coughing, she asked Chu Gu how long the kitchen had gone unused. Chu Gu felt a little embarrassed but answered honestly, 2.5 years, before promptly making a run for it. Looking at a kitchen so terrible that even a dog would shake its head, Chiu felt both amused and exasperated. This so-called creator really was unbelievably dumb. She waved her hand and a flash of white light swept through the room. In an instant, the entire kitchen became spotless. For a cultivator, cleaning a kitchen was child's play. Outside, Chu Gu was on the phone calling for a delivery of cooking gas. While talking, he glanced toward the kitchen. Seeing it gleaming clean, he paused briefly before immediately understanding what had happened. Hearing Chu Gu speak, Chiu grew curious and asked who he was talking to. Chu Gu said he was ordering a gas delivery. Chiu leaned forward slightly and shot him a sideways look. "Then why did you suddenly freeze mid-sentence?" "Because I was looking at you." Chiu instantly wore an expression that screamed, "I'm about to hit you." Chu Gu bolted away at once, while Chiu merely snorted in response. Back in the living room, Chu Gu stared at his phone, his brows tightly furrowed. Chiu peeked over and asked what was wrong. Chu Gu said his comment section had erupted into insults. Chiu was confused. She couldn't quite understand why people would argue so fiercely over someone else's book. Chu Gu explained that it was just like cultivation in her world. Everyone had a different understanding of the Tao and conflict naturally followed. Though Chiu found it hard to accept comparing novels to the Tao, she understood the point. Her only takeaway was, people in this world had way too much free time. Chu Gu stared blankly at the review section, but he genuinely couldn't figure it out. His book wasn't even that popular, there was no external promotion, and all he wrote was a self-rescue from poison plot. So why had the comments suddenly exploded into chaos? It made no sense. Seeing this, Chiu felt that she might have caused Chu Gu a lot of trouble and asked him worriedly if this was actually a bad thing for him. Chu Gu stood up and shook his head. On the contrary, this was a good thing. Comments meant traffic brought in new readers, so overall it was a net gain. He then told Chiu not to worry and added that her history book had arrived. Chiu took the book Chu Gu handed her and looked at the title on the cover, 5,000 Years of History. She couldn't help but remark that this civilization was really young, not even older than she was. Chu Gu gently patted Chiu on the head. All right, I get it, you're an old lady." The very next second, Chu Gu got smacked back. Clutching his aching hand, he hurriedly explained that those claims of billions of years were mostly exaggerated anyway. Cultivators always like to blow things out of proportion. Chiu gave a non-committal, "Oh." She then sat neatly by the window and began reading through the historical changes of this world in earnest. Chu stared at her blankly and blurted out, "I write you read, this scene could be a painting." Just as Chu felt he had said something incredibly poetic, the mood shattered in the very next instant. The doorbell rang loudly, followed by a shout from outside, "Gas delivery." Chiu looked at Chu and couldn't help but laugh. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Chuji's good friend Zhang Qiren, once a struggling author just like him. At this moment he stood atop a high-rise building, gazing into the distance. The screen of the phone in his hand showed Chuji's comment section, and he murmured softly, "Brother, this is as far as I can help you." Meanwhile, Chu was inside his apartment, fully immersed in writing. Whenever Chu paused to take a sip of water, Chiu's gaze would unconsciously drift toward him. A few thoughts crossed her mind. Chu was working while she had nothing to do. Should she pour him some water or make tea? But the thought was quickly dismissed. After all, that was something only a girlfriend would do, or a servant girl. After a long while, Chu rubbed his aching neck. By then he had already set the tone for the next stage of the outline. No more harems for the male lead. Instead, the story would follow a solitary and austere path of cultivation which came with many advantages. First, Chiu's issue would be much easier to handle. Second, there would be no need to worry about getting dragged into vendettas because of romantic entanglements. Third, he wouldn't have to juggle multiple female leads, he could focus purely on the plot. As the new chapter went live, the comments section remained as noisy as ever. Chu checked the subscription numbers in the back end and let out a quiet sigh of relief. He had expected to lose at least half. Instead, only 1/10 was gone. That was acceptable. After all, Chiu's arc was bound to be hard for some readers to accept. At that moment, Chu suddenly caught a whiff of something fragrant. Following the smell, he found Chiu cooking. The wok was stirring itself while Chiu stood nearby, still reading her book. When Chiu noticed Chu staring at her in a daze, she snorted lightly and asked, "Never seen immortal arts used for cooking?" Chu honestly hadn't. Half amused, he asked why she didn't just make the food instantly cooked. With a flick of her finger, the food in the wok flew neatly onto a plate. She said that doing it instantly lacked feeling. Food made by hand was better. Once Chu sat down to eat, he nearly swallowed his tongue. The food Chiu made was simply too good. He couldn't stop eating. Seeing this, Chiu felt pleased and wondered if her skills could earn money as a chef. In theory, that was possible, but one problem couldn't be solved: Chiu's identity. Chiu understood the difficulty. If a complete stranger with no records suddenly appeared, who would believe it? Still, she remained optimistic. If it couldn't be done, then so be it. She didn't want to exhaust herself over an identity anyway. Living like this was already fine. Chu felt a quiet sense of helplessness. He still thought he wasn't capable enough. After that, he asked Chiu how much she understood about this world, and whether there was anything that needed explaining. Chiu thought for a moment, then shook her head, saying there wasn't for now. Then she changed the topic, mentioning that she had read many books on myths and legends. She felt that this world should still have spiritual energy. Chu burped and said that many books use similar concepts, like spiritual energy dispersing after the severing of heaven and earth, or after dragon veins were destroyed. Chiu shook her head slightly. She didn't think it had completely vanished, only that it was extremely thin. And she wasn't sure if it was just her imagination, but this time the spiritual energy she sensed felt slightly stronger than before, though still far too faint to confirm. Chu looked up, his expression turning serious. Could it be that this world was undergoing a spiritual revival? Was that why Chiu could leave the book? If spiritual energy was truly returning, then unusual cases like theirs might not be isolated. That meant he couldn't keep hiding at home, doing nothing but writing every day. Maybe attending author meetups could lead him to unexpected supernatural clues. The problem was, he was socially awkward and terrible at socializing. Still, seeing Chiu making changes herself, this didn't seem like such a big deal anymore. Besides, washing dishes with immortal arts was ridiculously convenient. Chu also set his first personal goal, working out. But not long after, he was already completely exhausted. Chiu, dressed in a light blue tracksuit, looked at him with dissatisfaction and used a new word she'd learned online, asking if Chu was acting weak. It had only been a few laps, he should run at least 50 more. Chuga couldn't take it anymore and switched to pull-ups. Chiuchiu watched and immediately started mocking him. Why was there only pull and no up? After that, Chuga went home and began doing push-ups, panting heavily. The more Chiuchiu watched, the stranger the posture looked to her, and she asked what kind of bizarre cultivation stance this was. Chuga collapsed onto the floor in less than 3 minutes. Chiuchiu's gaze turned odd again. This was his so-called half-hour? Chuga finally snapped, jumped up, and complained about her staring at him all the time, telling her to go read her book instead. Chiuchiu picked up the book and clicked her tongue. Unable to continue exercising, Chuga decided to take a shower and casually asked if Chiuchiu wanted to wash up as well. Chiuchiu calmly replied that she had cleansing arts and didn't need to. Chuga didn't mind, just muttering that he'd wash himself. It felt like he hadn't washed at all. Soon the sound of running water echoed from the bathroom. Chiuchiu unconsciously started flipping pages faster, her cheeks puffing slightly. Living with a man really was troublesome. Just one door away with a completely naked man showering inside made it impossible for her to stay calm. She forced herself not to think about it, yet Chuji's last remark still lingered in her mind. Chiuchiu glanced down at herself. Even though she knew cleansing arts as a woman, she still had the desire to soak in a bath. Which meant Chuji's final comment was probably intentional. There was no way he didn't know her habits. He clearly wanted to experience what it felt like to have a woman bathing on the other side of the door. Convinced she had seen through him, Chiuchiu stood up angrily and went to her own bedroom. She wasn't going to let Chuga have his way. But the moment she entered, she froze. The bedsheets, pillows, and blanket were all neatly arranged. A faint, pleasant fragrance lingered in the air. Had Chugu prepared all of this before she even returned from the book world? Just how much was he looking forward to living with her? Chiuchiu touched the little pig plush on the bed. She accepted the thought behind it, but she truly didn't need to sleep. It turned out that whether mortal or immortal, as long as they were women, they all loved bathing. With Chiuchiu sleeping right next door, Chuga found himself tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep, even after all the exercise he'd done that day. Eventually, he decided to get up and use the bathroom. But the moment he opened the bathroom door, thick steam filled his vision along with a set of pajamas. And then, an overwhelmingly striking figure and Chiuchiu's delicate, damp face. Chugu froze, his eyes instinctively drifting to her flushed lips and those long, pale legs. Realizing what had just happened, Chiuchiu's face slowly turned crimson. This was the most panicked she had ever been in her life. She had sworn not long ago that she wouldn't bathe at all. And now she had not only been caught sneaking a shower, but was also wearing the exact same pajamas as Chugu, leaving her mortified. So she really had been tricked by him back then, huh? Just as she was about to snap under his gaze and find an excuse to explode, Chugu simply smiled at her gently and said in a low voice, "Good night. Get some rest." Watching Chugu walk into the bathroom, Chiuchiu swallowed the anger she had been about to unleash. When the next day arrived, Chugu explained how to use the air conditioner, telling her that if she felt hot at night she could just turn it on. No need to sneak off for a bath anymore. Chiuchiu responded absent-mindedly, her gaze wandering, when suddenly she heard Chugu let out a sharp cry. It turned out Chugu had completely collapsed from training, sprawled on the floor groaning that he couldn't go on, then cautiously asked whether he could skip today's workout. Chiuchiu shot him a sideways glance. "So this is your resolve to change?" She walked over and poked him, making Chugu yelp in pain over and over again. The truth was, Chugu had neglected exercise for years, then went all out yesterday without any recovery. His muscles were screaming. He asked if there was any way to treat it. Chiuchiu thought for a moment. Of course there was. With basic immortal techniques, this kind of soreness shouldn't even exist. Then she stared at Chugu like he was an insect and demanded an explanation. Why could her arts work remotely on everything else, yet healing was the one thing that couldn't? Chuji's gaze immediately drifted away. Did something like this really need explaining? Haven't you seen it on TV? Male leads can heal men through clothes, but when it's women they always have to strip. He wrote harem novels. Of course the settings had to follow that logic, right? One look at his expression was enough for Chiuchiu to know it was definitely not a wholesome setting. She told the still daydreaming Chugu to go back and patch it. Chugu flatly refused. This kind of healing method wasn't something you could just patch away. Chiuchiu gave him a cold look. "So you're saying that if healing is needed I have to touch you?" Chugu was just about to say yes when Chiuchiu turned away in anger. "Heal yourself if you want. See how long you last in pain. Of course, Chugu wasn't about to miss such a golden chance. He shamelessly tried to explain, claiming it was all to figure out the secret behind Chiyochio's crossing. If the soreness dragged on for days, wouldn't that just be a waste of time? Chiyochio answered with a kick that sent Chugu flying. Do you really think I'm that easy to fool? Lying on the floor, Chugu could only sigh that a 10,000-year-old granny really wasn't easy to trick. Chiyochio let out a soft snort. Then she glanced at the pajamas Chugu had left by the couch, secretly casting a spell, changing the doll pattern on the chest into a crying face. Chiyochio almost burst out laughing. She felt oddly satisfied. It was different from hers now and much easier on the eyes. She looked again at Chugu as he continued training and found herself thinking, maybe she should learn more about this world's medical knowledge. Otherwise, she might miss quite a few sights. As a cultivator, she was naturally calm and unhurried, never feeling an urgent need to explore everything at once. It was Chugu who cared more, feeling she was learning too slowly, always confined to just one room. But Chiyochio didn't see it that way. To her, the scenery within one room was far from exhausted. How could she rush to talk about a lifetime? After all, her lifespan was long. She could take her time to understand everything. Perhaps decades later, watching Chugu grow old with white hair might even be interesting. Yet as the thought lingered, Chiyochio frowned slightly. Somehow the idea of Chugu dying of old age didn't sit well with her. She promptly smacked Chugu on the back, telling him to stop slacking off and go rest early. As for those other emotions stirring inside her, Chiyochio brushed them aside. After all, the creator god wasn't allowed to die. And just like that, Chuji's painful good days began. At that moment, Chiyochio stared at the phone, her eyes gleaming. It seemed to be the same kind of artifact Chugu had used to summon liquefied gas from afar. Something he had bought for her. Chugu even planned to get her a second-hand laptop. With those two things, Chiyochio could understand the modern world much faster. Chiyochio hesitated. That sounded expensive. Could Chuji's royalties really handle it? Chugu simply replied, wasn't it supposed to be a loan? Chiyochio puffed out her cheeks, accusing him of deliberately making her owe so much that she'd have no way to repay it. Chugu looked surprised and laughed. You already know that trick? Chiyochio snorted, then broke into a mischievous grin. She asked Chugu if he knew the simplest way to repay a debt. Seeing the confusion in Chuji's eyes, Chiyochio made a throat-cutting gesture, her killing intent obvious. If you're dead, there's nothing left to repay. Chugu burst out laughing, shook his head and said that wasn't his Chiyo-wuji. Chiyochio shot him a look of pure disdain. Since when did she belong to him? At that moment, Chugu asked Chiyochio to hold out her hand. She hesitated slightly, but Chugu reached out and grabbed her small hand anyway. Seeing that Chiyochio was about to lose her temper, Chugu quickly said, "Wait." Then he pulled out a pen and began writing on her palm. Feeling the touch against her skin, Chiyochio's cheeks slowly flushed red. A moment later, Chugu finished. Smiling, he told Chiyochio to remember it. It was his phone number. Chiyochio stared at the string of numbers on her hand. A phone number meant just for her. Did this mean she was getting closer and closer to becoming someone of the real world? And in her contacts, there was only one name: Chugu. Even the number itself carried a mark that belonged solely to him. Even though he wasn't wealthy, that feeling of, I have a responsibility to help you, was genuine. Something he was steadily putting into action. Thinking back to what Chugu had said, Chiyochio suddenly realized he might be asking her to help heal him, and that she probably wouldn't refuse. Yet that realization made her want to return to the book world for a moment. She didn't understand the emotion, only that it felt unsettling. Chiyochio glanced at Chugu, wondering if she should take the initiative to leave. But then she thought there was no real need to run away. Maybe it was better to just cook him more good food. When Chiyochio went out to buy groceries, Chugu taught her how to use the payment app, and she put on the modern clothes she had just bought. Chugu asked her to set an ID for the app, carefully explaining that it was basically a nickname. Chiyochio typed in "water follows the heavens." As for the name Chiyo-wuji, she wasn't sure. Did even her personal preferences fall under fate? According to Chuji's original idea, heaven might have referred to Chu Tianga, hence water follows the heavens. But now it wasn't any different. In her current world, Chugu was her heaven anyway, so didn't the meaning still hold? Chiyochio glanced back at Chugu and saw how happy he looked. She realized he hadn't thought that deeply about it. He was simply happy, so she kept what he had suggested. In the end, Chiyochio decided not to overthink it. She was Chiyo-wuji. Whether she changed or not, what difference did it make? Chiu then asked where people in this world bought cookbooks, saying she wanted to get a few first. Chiu pointed at the phone in her hand and said there was no need. Recipes could be searched directly on the phone. Chiu picked it up with some doubt. Was it really that convenient? Chiu chuckled. Computers and phones were the most important artifacts of this world. Once you mastered them, you were basically a modern person. Chiu asked him to teach her. Meanwhile, outside the apartment complex, an unfamiliar man in a hoodie arrived downstairs at Chu Ji's building. In the next moment, he slowly merged into the wall. Inside the apartment, Chu was still focused on typing. He was thinking about the storyline involving Chiu and the male lead Chu Tiange. Since they wouldn't interact anymore, he considered shifting to a dual protagonist structure. To keep the change from feeling too abrupt, he wondered if he should write more standalone arcs for other characters. Just then, a message from his editor popped up, making Chu Ji's heart sink. At a time like this, contacting him, could it be the same fate Zhang Qiren had faced? Was his novel about to be cut short? But that wasn't the case. His word count had reached a milestone, and the editor had successfully secured him a featured promotion, telling him to stockpile chapters over the next few days. Chu felt both delighted and puzzled that he hadn't expected that a completely unrestrained encounter would actually earn him a recommendation. Just then, another message popped up, from his good friend Zhang Qiren. Zhang Qiren asked why Chu wasn't interacting in the comments, saying he was acting like a cold, emotionless bot. Chu replied that he had shown up before. The next moment, though, both of them claimed they were busy. Zhang Qiren immediately switched to a sarcastic tone, teasing that Chu must be busy dating. After all, he'd seen a beautiful woman shopping with him. Chu felt a chill. How had Zhang Qiren noticed that? He and Chiu hadn't gone out that many times. Was Zhang Qiren working nearby? He asked directly, and Zhang Qiren replied that he'd become a security guard, that he'd even chased a thief a couple of days ago, but the guy got away. He'd spotted Chu by coincidence and warned him to be careful lately. Chu frowned. There were thieves near his place? But just then, Chiu called him to eat and he didn't dwell on it. Chiu looked at him with a smile and asked what was going on. Chu proudly said he'd run into some good luck today. Something like receiving a sect reward and being allowed into the library pavilion. How much he could gain from it depended on himself. Chiu immediately understood. That really was great news, and she couldn't help remarking that even the protagonist treatment had fallen onto Chu. Chu simply smiled at her, saying nothing more. Chiu froze for a moment, and her smile vanished instantly. She turned a murderous gaze toward Chu. Wasn't she herself the one with protagonist-level fortune? And now it had shifted onto Chu. Chu hurriedly shoveled food into his mouth, survival instinct at full throttle, saying that maybe the appearance of the female lead had brought luck along with her. Chiu snorted lightly, decided not to argue, and kept eating. Not long after, she put down her chopsticks. She said she was going to cultivate using the noon yang energy and told him not to disturb her unless it was important. In the silent afternoon, Chiu sat cross-legged in her room and entered cultivation. But at that moment, a shadow slowly appeared on the wall behind her. The shadow grew clearer and clearer until it stepped straight out of the wall itself. It looked like a wall-phasing technique. The man in black swept his gaze around and immediately spotted Chiu in cultivation. His eyes went wide, his stare turning slack, almost drooling. She was far too beautiful. A surge of wild joy followed that he might have entered the wrong room, but this was no loss at all. Just as his hand reached toward Chiu, she opened her eyes coldly. She turned in an instant. Reality seemed to flip, and the man was struck as if by lightning. Unable to move, unable to scream, even his breath stolen away as though he'd fallen straight into hell. Had spiritual energy truly begun to revive in this world? Because this man had not only used a wall-phasing ability, he had targeted Chiu. Chiu let out a cold snort. The man was frozen in place instantly. At that moment, Chu rushed in behind him and swung a broom down hard onto the back of his head. Chu immediately turned to Chiu, tense, asking if she was all right. Chiu planted a foot on the man, looking utterly relaxed as she shot back. "Who are you asking?" Only then did Chu look at the unconscious thief and realize, when you're dealing with a cultivator like Chiu, the one who really needs worrying about is the thief. Chiu glanced down at him, a hint of curiosity in her eyes. She asked Chu how he'd noticed someone who phased through a wall without making a sound. Chu scratched his head awkwardly and said he hadn't fallen asleep during his nap, heard a bit of noise, felt something was off, and came over. Chiu looked at him and quietly mocked him in her mind. He'd actually been paying attention to the next room the whole time, hadn't he? He barely had the strength to catch a chicken, was still sore all over after giving blood, yet he'd panicked and charged in with a broom, his shoes even on the wrong feet. The sight stirred a faint, unexpected sweetness in Chiuchio's chest. But her mouth showed no mercy. She poked Chugu and told him to take it easy. Someone that weak rushing in to catch a thief, especially when the guy was holding a dagger. Chugu protested stubbornly, saying this was a man's job. The thief on the ground finally woke up, utterly speechless. Was this really what getting caught was supposed to look like? He'd imagined hundreds of ways to die, just not this one. But when the thief suddenly heard the woman casually ask whether they should kill him, he nearly jumped in sheer terror. Thankfully, he then heard Chugu say they couldn't kill him and should hand him over to the authorities, which finally let him breathe again. Right after that, Chiuchio calmly asked Chugu if turning him into a vegetable would be a problem. Seeing Chuji's confusion, Chiuchio explained that she was thinking of soul-searching him. Chugu considered it for a moment, then refused. Turning him brain-dead before handing him over would just cause trouble. Better to ask first. Chiuchio walked closer to the thief, faint arcs of electricity flickering around her hand, and said softly, "And what if he refuses to talk?" Before she even finished speaking, the thief dropped straight into a sitting position and shouted that he'd answer anything the boss wanted. This time he was genuinely terrified. Someone who could immobilize a person with just a look was not someone he dared gamble against. If he really ended up brain-dead, that would be game over. Chiuchio looked down at the now extremely obedient thief and coldly asked where his wall-phasing ability came from. The thief froze for a moment, then blurted out, "That's all you want to ask? Aren't you going to ask why I came here?" Seeing his hesitation, Chiuchio's gaze turned even colder. Under that stare, cold sweat poured down his face as he shouted that it was an awakened innate ability, and that lots of people were like this. Hearing that, Chiuchio and Chugu exchanged a glance. Lots of people? That meant spiritual resurgence or superpower awakenings were really happening. Chugu pressed him. How many was lots? He'd lived nearly 30 years and had never heard a thing. The thief hurriedly explained that it was actually very, very few. Ordinary people wouldn't know, but since they were special, over time things started to line up and small circles naturally formed. Chugu exchanged another glance with Chiuchio. He then sized up the thief and said, "You awakened wall phasing and decided to use it to steal. That's a pretty high-end circle you're in." The thief glanced at himself and froze. Do I really look that much like a thief? He regretted not changing clothes. At that moment, lightning flickered again around Chiuchio's hand. Terrified, the thief blurted out that he was looking for an enemy. He only knew she was somewhere in this area, not the exact location, so he searched door to door. Chugu immediately shot him down, saying he was lying. As soon as he said that, Chiuchio formed an invisible palm and slapped him without hesitation. Curious, Chiuchio turned to Chugu and asked how he knew the thief was lying. Chugu sneered. "Who goes door to door at noon looking for someone? Not everyone takes a midday nap. You'd already confirmed whether the target was home or not. That means your target was precise, not a random sweep." Hearing Chugu say that, Chiuchio's invisible palm slammed down again with even more force. Watching the thief get beaten senseless, Chugu couldn't help breaking into a cold sweat. This dragon lady is way too violent. The fact that he hadn't been beaten to death before was pure luck. The thief was already swollen into a pig-headed mess, crying and begging, "Stop! Please stop!" He hurriedly confessed that he was targeting Yuang. He had followed her and saw the elevator stop on this floor, but didn't dare trail her too closely. Chuji's mind instantly flashed to the girl living across the hall. She always seemed to sleep during the day and go out at night, often reeking of alcohol. Curious, Chugu asked what she did for a living. The thief said she fought in underground boxing rings. She won too often and crossed the wrong people, and some even suspected she took contract jobs. There were cases linked to her. Chugu couldn't help feeling speechless. The whole situation felt surreal. Underground boxing assassins actually existed now, and a beautiful girl at that, living right across the hall. But then again, his own novel's female lead had stepped into reality. Compared to that, nothing really felt strange anymore. Chiuchio stepped up beside him and asked in a low voice if he wanted to take a look at their circle. After a brief hesitation, Chugu refused. He didn't know how strong they were, and walking into danger on purpose didn't feel smart. He asked whether Chiuchio could erase the man's recent memories and then hand him over to the police. Chiuchio looked at him without speaking. In her view, this level of involvement was nothing. If anything, it was better to dive straight in. Still, she chose to follow Chuji's wishes. Erasing short-term memories wasn't difficult, and Chugu understood her thinking anyway. Because only by doing that could one enter this world's supernatural undercurrents as fast as possible. Once you stepped into such hidden circles, things like identity stopped being real obstacles. Compared to worrying about daily meals and expenses at home, this kind of path was far more meaningful. But clearly, Chugu didn't want to abruptly shatter the quiet life they had now. Before, she wasn't in a hurry while Chugu wanted to move faster. Now it was the opposite. Chugu wanted to avoid it while she wanted to push ahead simply because they saw change differently. Just then, Chiuchiu slapped the thief again. Turns out she had decided to rob him on the spot, demanding he hand over anything valuable he had. That move made both Chugu and the thief freeze, invisible question marks practically floating over their heads. After Chiuchiu's brief electrotherapy, the thief obediently handed over all the cash he had on him. Holding the bills, Chiuchiu asked Chugu if this was what people here used as silver notes, and whether the numbers on them worked the same way. When Chugu confirmed it, Chiuchiu immediately brightened up, thinking this was way faster than Chugu earning money by writing. Chugu covered his face and muttered, "Sorry, this is on me that I didn't wash you properly." Chiuchiu bent down, grabbed the thief by the collar and said calmly that it was time to deal with him. His memories had already been wiped. Moments later, Chugu and Chiuchiu dumped the thief into a roadside greenbelt. Chiuchiu had locked his memory at the point before he entered the residential area. That way he wouldn't know who attacked him and it had nothing to do with them. Hearing this, Chugu glanced at Chiuchiu and asked why she seemed so practiced at it. At that moment, the neighborhood security noticed the unconscious thief, called for backup and contacted the police. As Chugu and Chiuchiu walked back, she asked if he felt uneasy. Chugu answered yes. Chiuchiu asked if it was because she robbed the man. Chugu said that was part of it and told her not to do things like that again. It would eventually cause trouble in this world. Chiuchiu looked at him and said quietly that she hadn't done it because he wrote her that way. Chugu shrugged and didn't deny Chiuchiu's actions. After all, her way of thinking was closely tied to the world he had created. Maybe it was a reflection of his own inner thoughts as well, which was why he didn't quite know how to stop it. What truly worried him was how addictive fast money could be. Do it too often and trouble was inevitable. It wasn't really about this incident itself. To be honest, punishing a thief like that actually felt pretty satisfying. Chiuchiu nodded slightly, signaling she'd be more careful in the future. Still, Chiuchiu was curious. When Chugu said it was only part of the reason, what was the main one? Was it because he had brushed against the supernatural world for real? Chugu glanced around and nodded. Maybe deep down, everyone carried a dream of the extraordinary, a world of martial arts or cultivation. But when those things truly appeared before you, a sense of unease was unavoidable. He gave a self-mocking smile. After all, he was just an ordinary man who had lived an ordinary 20-something years. Chiuchiu tilted her head. A man who could create worlds, calling himself ordinary. If her creator were truly just a common man, then wouldn't all living beings be no better than livestock? Chugu scratched his head awkwardly. That really wasn't his achievement. He had no idea how Chiuchiu managed to come out of the book. Chiuchiu snorted softly. So what? Those who awakened supernatural talents, was that truly their own ability? Weren't those gifts also dropped from the heavens? Unease comes from weakness. If you're strong enough, who could possibly dictate your life? Chugu froze, staring blankly at Chiuchiu. Yeah, she was strong enough that she had nearly cut down her own creator, forcing fate itself to be rewritten. Just then a police car sped past them. Both of them stopped talking and looked in the direction it was heading. To Chuji's surprise, he spotted a familiar face near the police car, Lin Weyoung.